Hello everyone, I am Julian Morris of the Channel 5 News. The headlines: the body of leading vascular surgeon Merlin Kelsick fished out of the sea on Friday. Cabinet Secretary Steve Farrell says an overhaul of the public service is long overdue, and the Prime Minister addresses Freedom Party concerns over anti-terrorism legislation. The details after this. First up in the news, Dominica has been shocked by the news of the death of leading vascular surgeon Dr. Merlin Kelsick. Reports of a search for the missing doctor made news Friday morning after he apparently went fishing Thursday night and did not return. Due to the ongoing investigation, the police has not issued a statement yet, but Channel 5 News spoke to one of Dr. Kelsick's closest relatives outside his office on Friday.
He was very kind, very loving, very supportive. He loved his family. He chose to come to Dominica after his father got ill, and he decided with all the skills that he had, he could contribute something to the health system in Dominica. He was my father's younger brother, and it is difficult. I had to identify his body this morning, and that is not something I was planning to do at this time. He have quite a few siblings. Most of them are living outside. My father is in England. He has brothers in Vancouver, Jersey, sister in Houston, Barbados, brother in Antigua. They're all over. And it was very difficult for me to call my father. I did not tell him directly. I called my sister in England and asked her to go meet him because he lives alone. And she went over, talked to him. So I am in communication with my uncle, Wilbur, just updating him on what is going on and the process. And as a family, it's going to be very difficult for us, because everybody knew him as Dr. Merlin. I knew him as my uncle. I knew him as my loving uncle, my very affectionate uncle. And he told me, I think you are my sister. You are not like a niece. We are as close as brother and sisters. So that's the connection I had with my uncle. We talk about almost everything, stuff that he had plans to do. We talk about those things. It's hard. I just want people to remember him as a Dominican who loved Dominica, and a Dominican who wanted to do his best and give all that he could to help the people of Dominica, educate them about the health, what they should expect, and when they see certain things, how they could care for themselves. I think he had a radio program that he was informing individuals of how to take care of their health. And anytime you visited him, it's not like a 5 minutes or 15 minutes. He would go into details to tell you what it is that your problem was and how you could care for yourself. That was the kind of detailed person that he was. And it is extremely sad that he is no longer with us. It is extremely sad that Dominica have lost one of the best surgeons. He specialized in 5 different areas. I can't tell you them at the moment because it's a little bit traumatic for me.
DNO showed a picture of the fishing rod which the doctor used at the ferry terminal on Thursday night. In more news now, public servants have been challenged to be ethical in the delivery of service to customers.
The call came from Chief Personnel Officer Cecilia Carr when she addressed the launching of Public Service Day 2018 on Friday. Carr says public servants must strive for excellence in their duties as they continue on the journey to develop Dominica.
For me, as Chief Personnel Officer, this journey should be one of excellence in service delivery, sustainability and transformation. We sound a call for public officers to be ethical in undertaking daily duties. The need for us to function for the greater good, for the greater numbers. We must examine how best we can satisfy our customers and respond to their needs.
Activities will continue throughout the year to recognize public servants, and among the events are an ecumenical service, a sports day, and an awards and recognition ceremony. Public Service Day 2018 is being celebrated under the theme, Building a Resilient Public Service, a Collective Response.
In building resilience, transformation is a key component, shifting from the status quo. We'll be expected to approach our challenges of service delivery and methods in a profound and radical change, a change process that orients the public service in a new direction and take it to an entirely different level of effectiveness. Transformation for us cannot be a turnaround. It must be a change of character and configuration of structures, a radical change.
Meantime, Minister for Family and Gender Affairs, who represented the Prime Minister at Friday's function, commended public servants for the work they did to help return Dominica to normalcy post-Hurricane Maria and called on the sector to further position itself to help in the rebuilding of Dominica after the storm.
It is important that as public officers that you craft a response to the recovery and rebuilding back of Dominica. In order to do this, the following questions are very pertinent. What are your current skills and competencies? How efficient are you at what you do? What opportunities are presently available to enable you to enhance your capacity to deliver? Can you produce faster and better? Are you currently utilizing your greatest potential where you are? How can you motivate your colleagues to improve productivity and consistency? How can we simplify our processes to have better outcomes? How well do you manage time? How could you reduce expenditure yet realize greater output?
Public Service Day is recognized internationally on 23rd June every year. Andrea Louis, Channel 5 News.
A statement released by the Dominica Freedom Party is calling for greater dialogue on the proposed anti-terrorism legislation, which is heading to Parliament on Monday. The leader of the Dominica Freedom Party says while the proposed legislation makes a distinction between a terrorist act and a legitimate protest action, he is concerned that the bill does not define what constitutes protest action. He believes this could leave room for the law to subdue legitimate protest action in defense of democracy by categorizing them as acts of terrorism. The DFP leader believes acts of civil disobedience in defense of democracy could be interpreted as acts of terrorism. The DFP leader says he believes the public ought to be given an opportunity to fully understand the proposed legislation and to have an opportunity to make recommendations to protect their fundamental rights and freedoms. When contacted by Channel 5 News about the DFP leader's concerns, the Attorney General pointed to Clause 2B of the proposed legislation, which according to the AG is unambiguous or very clear on the question being raised by the DFP leader. Meantime, the Prime Minister has responded to the Freedom Party's criticism or concerns over the proposed anti-terrorism legislation.
The Dominica Freedom Party released a statement just about the same time the UWP leader raised his concerns that the legislation might target the rights of people to protest. But the Prime Minister has pushed back, saying leaders have a responsibility to read the entirety of the proposed legislation for themselves before making public statements based on comments made by others who themselves have not fully read the bill.
In 1981, 19th of February 1981, I was just about, what, 10 years, 11 years? The Freedom Party passed a piece of legislation in Parliament. And the title of this piece of legislation was, and currently is, Prevention of Terrorism, and in parenthesis, Temporary Provisions Act, Act number 10 of 1981. Here the definition of terrorism in 1981 by the Freedom Party government. And the definition of terrorism then, how they define it in the Act, terrorism means the use or threat of violence for the purpose of putting the public or any sector of the public in fear, and includes any use or threat of violence for political ends, or may use or any use of violence or threat of violence with intent to subvert the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica, or the malicious destruction of or damage to public or private property for the purpose of putting the public or any sector of the public in fear, and includes such malicious destruction or damage for political ends, or the directing, organizing, or training of persons for the purpose of terrorism. This is what Damian Eugenia Charles, a lawyer, and you had Brian Allen in the cabinet, you had General Armour of blessed memory in the cabinet,
Roland David
in the cabinet, in the parliament. I think it is important that we read this again.
The Prime Minister says a clause-by-clause comparison would reveal that the Act of 1981 is even more stringent than the legislation currently being proposed.
In this bill, it has taken the time to spell out specifically which instances one can be deemed to have engaged him or his or herself in a terrorist act. In the Freedom Party 1981 legislation, it does not give you any of those categories. It gives you a carte blanche, very wide, it is wider than a fishing net of terrorism. As a leader, you must be reasoned, you must be advised, you must be calculated, you must be informed. You can't make a statement and even threaten violence. Threaten violence based on your own ignorance, based on your own self-imposed misinformation. And then somebody calls him now, I am satisfied that a representative of a foreign government called the leader of the opposition to tell him it's foolish he's talking and stop it. Not a leader, a representative of a foreign government called Mr. Linton to tell him, stop your usual foolishness. Go and read the bill. We helped in drafting that bill. And what you're saying in this bill is injurious to the international community.
Opposition Senator Isaac Baptist says government is lacking a clear post-disaster housing policy. On the issue of provision of housing assistance, the Castlebrush parliamentarian says it's too politicized.
There's no clear policy as to the distribution of building materials that government is providing assistance intend to provide. There should have been prioritized. There should be a clear policy so everybody knows. After Hurricane David in '79, the government and the Freedom Party, led by Mary Eugenia Charles of blessed memory, it was not the politicians who were involved in the distribution. The politicians, they're too involved in the distribution of assistance. Some people will not go for the assistance simply because the politics is involved. They feel like, well, I'm going for a favor. You have the community structures, the village councils, the community groups. You know what is required. The role of the politician is to monitor what's happening, and if there is need for intervention to ensure that it is fair, done fairly, they intervene.
He's suggesting government should have also set regulations to address the rising cost of building materials.
There are many persons who will be receiving in payments from their insurances so that they can assist themselves with reconstruction. But in many cases, they have not even received payment, or if they receive payment, because the assessment was made. I did a lot of assessments. The assessment was made on existing prices of, say, 2017. During the reconstruction effort, we have seen construction cost is up by at least 50% in many areas. The government has received assistance from the international community and our own local resources, and will be, which is rightly so, assisting persons in need. But the way that it has been approached is like it's politicized.
The Prime Minister has recognized in the past that people with insurance coverage, but whose homes are Underinsured will also receive state assistance. Another area Baptist said government took too long to act on ahead of the hurricane season is the reconstruction of shelters.
The fact that you knew that a hurricane would be back in the season within a short period of time, 8-9 months, you should have given priority to reconstruction of hurricane shelters throughout the community. Major priority. Public sector buildings that are very important for the running of the state. I mean, at this point in time, you cannot tell me that your judiciary, your high court system is not yet operational fully. Your land registration system not operational. These are key areas for the sustenance and maintenance and continued governance of a country.
You're watching Channel 5 News. Coming up, building resilience to geophysical disasters such as volcanoes and earthquakes. Thank you for staying with us. An overhaul of the public service governance and administrative structures is on the cards for Dominica. That's according to Cabinet Secretary Steve Farrell. During the launching of Public Service Day on Friday, Farrell announced that a new revamping of the governance and administrative structure of the public service is overdue. He pointed out that the proposed changes will go hand in hand with government's move to develop Dominica into the first climate-resilient nation in the world.
This new vision of building back better in every sector already requires a new public service governance and administrative structure. In this regard, we are a bit behind. We have seen the capacity constraints and the limitations of our existing processes and know that we need an overhaul and refocused public service, and we need it now. In other words, we need a service that will respond to CREED and at the same time prepare for the public service post the CREED era. These are revolutionary times, and modernization and refocusing is a must.
Sticking to the topic of climate resilience, the Cabinet Secretary revealed that a final draft of a national resilience strategy is nearing completion.
The Ministry of Planning has provided leadership in the collaborative effort with the Committee of Permanent Secretaries to develop a national resilient development strategy. This should be nearing its final draft. The strategy includes key focus on all ministries in an effort to build resilience in all sectors. Resilience in agriculture, health infrastructure, forestry, education, health system, among others. It came from the ministries, and it's a guide to ministries as we plan ahead.
Farrell also reminded public servants that efforts are underway to fully establish the Climate Resilience Execution Agency of Dominica. A medical doctor is encouraging the public to spearhead discussions to influence the authorities in acting on exploring the benefits of cannabis or marijuana use. Pascal thinks this would be timely given new information about the benefits of marijuana.
We need to now have a more informed discourse onto how we treat with the plant that seems to have so many benefits that other people in other parts of the world in which we live are using to make millions. And we here locking up our young people, destroying people's lives. There's new information about the plant. So it's with that information now nationally, people, it's not about the government or 10 guys up there. It's about the people now have to say, well, do we continue to make this legal or illegal? What can we do to embrace this new information? How do we treat with our laws? How do we treat with the people who break the laws? How do we treat with the people who have suffered because of the laws? So these are big issues.
As a member of the Organization for the Reformation of Anti-Cannabis Laws, he noted that the group's activism has not yet met the favor of government.
I have written about this. Oracle has been around. We have had sessions that we've invited the government or the public service to that people haven't come. We have had no invitation from the government or anything. And so one is left to wonder what is the government's position. But it's the people, really, for me. It's the people. It's the people's position on this that should be influential, because it's the people, the government acts on behalf of the people.
For him, however, it is not about pressuring the authorities, but educating the public so they can stir up national discussion on the matter.
It's not about Oracle saying it should be legal, and not Oracle is saying, look, we have information that's available worldwide, and we think this information should be considered as we treat the plant. Obviously, the plant is not only used medicinally, it's used for recreation, it's used economically, it's used spiritually by the Rastafarian community. So all of those things would have to be treated with. The authorities' failure to act on it, well, I think that'd be unfortunate if the authorities, because Dominica is in a position that Dominica should not be last on this thing. That's just my personal view.
And disaster risk management specialist Cecil Shillingford is reminding the authorities that it is necessary to also build resilience towards geophysical disasters. Shillingford says the thrust to climate resilience should be across the board.
We are now talking about climate resilience. I'm hoping that we are not looking at climate resilience in isolation of the other hazards, because you also have to look at the geophysical hazards. So if you're going to build a house, do not only make it climate resilience, you have to try to make it climate and geophysical resilience, because you could also have an earthquake. If you're close to the waterfront, you could have a tsunami. And if you are in a particular part of Dominica, you could have a volcano. So you have to look at all these things. Location, where we build. We have to look at the whole issue of wind versus earthquakes, and have what I would call total resilience, not only climate resilience, but total resilience.
But this is advice that the ODM would be giving to the authorities.
Yes, certainly. Certainly. I've made that point already.
He says the Office of Disaster Management would also want the public to consider a strong room to seek refuge in the advent of catastrophic hurricanes.
After Hurricane Maria, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, well, I'll just slab my house, I'll put a concrete roof on my house. But, I mean, the people have to be careful doing that, because the structure may not be able to support it. So they have to look at that aspect of it. But what we are saying is, going forward, if you could do some structural improvements to your building and put at least one room secured with a concrete roof, then at least that family is safe for the upcoming hurricane season and does not have to go to a shelter.
To end the news, a look again at the headlines. The body of leading vascular surgeon Merlin Kelsick fished out of the sea on Friday. Cabinet Secretary Steve Farrell says an overhaul of the public service is long overdue, and the Prime Minister addresses Freedom Party concerns over anti-terrorism legislation. Feel free to contact us at news@marpin2k4.com. You can access our past newscasts on our YouTube channel. On behalf of the production team, I am Julian Morris. Thank you for watching. It's weekend. Do have a good one.